2002. In Kaunas, homeless people were rummaging through trash bins on Studentų Street, hoping to find a better scrap or something they could sell. One of the bin offered a decent find: fast food leftovers, but nothing impressive, so there's no need to dig too deep. Other scavengers might beat him to the better stuff if he's not quick. One of the homeless men, an expert in his field, was determined to find the best bin of them all, and this one looked promising. Unfortunately, he was very unlucky. When he opened the bin, what he found was something he absolutely did not want to see. Inside a bag, with a familiar Maxima store logo, there was a human hand. His first reaction was shock, but he thought, no way, this must be some Halloween prop. He was convinced that when he touches it, it would feel like a cold synthetic material. However, when he picked it up, he recoiled in horror. This wasn't a fake hand. It was real. But what the hell was it doing in the trash? Although the homeless man had seen a lot throughout his life, this felt like a bad horror movie. His hands were shaking and everything around him seemed to be blurry. One of his companions ran to nearby people, asking them to call the police, while others stayed by the bin, unable to ignore their horrific curiosity. Was it just a hand? Looking closer, oh god, no. It was a whole severed arm. The shock deepened, and the sight began to make them sick. The severed hand made some weird sense. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was some punishment. But now, it looked like a desecration. As they continued to dig through the trash, they found a spine and 3 human ribs with some tissue. The homeless man could hardly stand. Maybe the shock had diluted his senses at first, but the smell from the bin, it was like something straight out of a nightmare. Within a few hours, police stations in Kaunas were flooded with reports of body parts being discovered in various trash bins around the city. More and more people began their morning with one of the most horrific finds they could imagine. It was a gruesome puzzle. A monster who had created it desecrated the body and discarded it as if it were leftover fast food. But now the police had one question: who was this dismembered victim? They began looking through missing persons report, asking local residents if anyone had gone missing. By 2002, Lithuania already had a well-developed fingerprint database, so it wasn't long before they identified the victim, Rimgaudas Revzinas, a former soldier with a criminal record. However, the police really didn't need to do all that. The final, chilling discovery made everything clear. In yet another trash bin, inside a bag, was a severed human head. Rimgaudas Revzinas, who lived on Žemgulio Street in Kaunas, wasn't a particularly remarkable man, though he did have a strong fondness for drinking. However, after such brutal execution, the investigation began immediately. The main suspect was Zenonas, a 56-year-old man who shared an apartment with Rimgaudas. Many violent crimes often stem from close relationships, so Zenonas became the primary suspect. Zenonas was well known for his long history of criminal activities, with 8 prior convictions. But what drove him to commit such a brutal act for the 9th time? On the evening of August 28, Zenonas and Rimgaudas were drinking and having a good time, but their conversation soon shifted to dirty business. Rimgaudas suggested they steal something. He had already selected his targets and had a whole plan. Or so Zenonas later claimed. Zenonas rejected the offer, saying that he never does what others tell him to do and always acts on his own mind. Rimgaudas, however, wasn't one to back down easily. Despite Zenonas being much bigger and a former boxer, Rimgaudas insulted him, saying Zenonas would change his mind in the next morning. These words stung Zenonas deeply. He had clearly rejected the idea, and now Rimgaudas was challenging him. Frustrated, Zenonas struck Rimgaudas hard in the face. With one punch from a former boxer, Rimgaudas immediately lost consciousness. I want to stress that this account is solely based on Zenonas' testimony, we'll never hear the other side of the story. Also, it seems odd that a man with 8 convictions would react so strongly to a suggestion to steal something or simply a harsh comment. It feels like there's more to the story. However, Zenonas, he only struck his friend, and even though Rimgaudas lost consciousness, Zenonas could have easily called the police and explained that it was a result of a drunken argument. But Zenonas didn't do that. As he later claimed, he tried to revive Rimgaudas, performing CPR, but it didn't work. And for God knows what reason, this is where the true horror begins. Zenonas, now completely detached from any sense of humanity, decided to dismember his friend's body. He justified it by saying that Rimgaudas was a bad person and that it would be too expensive for his mother to bury him. So he decided to chop up the body and dispose of it in trash bins. It's perhaps the only case where a murderer seems more concerned with the financial burdens of the victim's mother as he's killing the victim. What followed was truly one of the most grotesque acts I've ever read about. Using a large kitchen knife, Zenonas, drawing on his knowledge of hunting and butchering, began methodically dismembering the body, placing the parts into 5 plastic bags. I won't go into further detail. I'm sure you can imagine what someone with such skills did to the body. Investigators later described it as a total destruction of the remains. Unfortunately, not all of the 5 bags containing the body parts were found, so some of Rimgaudas' remains likely ended up in a landfill. After finishing his gruesome work, Zenonas cleaned himself up, had a snack, and went to sleep. The next morning, Zenonas woke up early, around 5:30 a.m. He claimed that the neighbor and their friend woke him up, bringing alcohol. While Zenonas stated that he refused to drink, the neighbor, when questioned, denied this account, confirming that they did not visit Zenonas that morning. Zenonas remained calm, showered again, had a sandwich, drank some coffee, and cleaned up any blood that still remained in the apartment. He then began disposing of the bags with the body parts, throwing them into the trash bins on Basanavičiaus, Studentų, Rimvydo, and Partizanų streets. When people around them started asking where Rimgaudas has gone and why Zenonas was locking the apartment door, he claimed that Rimgaudas was out drinking somewhere in the center of the city. Since both Zenonas and Rimgaudas weren't exactly the most friendliest individuals, no one actually questioned Zenonas' explanation for a while. Eventually, when the police began investigating the case and turned their attention to Zenonas, he confessed to the murder and even apologized to the victim's family. His actions were cold-blooded, but he didn't try to deny what he had done. Zenonas seemed like a strange character. He thinks about the victim's mother, apologizes, but still brutally dismembers the body of Rimgaudas, whom he claimed was his friend. The court sentenced Zenonas Misiūnas to 10 years of imprisonment for murder and corpse desecration. Zenonas didn't agree with the verdict and had already appealed to the court. To remind you of the facts, Zenonas not only killed a man, his friend, not only dismembered him, desecrating his body, but also disposed of the body parts in trash bins. And for all of that, he received only 10 years in prison. He's still challenging his sentence, and the only logical explanation for this is if he believes he got it too lenient. Zenonas Misiūnas should never walk our streets again. But that's just my opinion. Rimgaudas' life ended tragically and horrifically, but Zenonas' story continues. Another thing to note is that much of the information about such cases in Lithuania might be destroyed or inaccessible due to European Union's privacy and data protection laws. I'm not sure if there's a way to access more detailed information about other people's cases and records, but I will try to find that information and bring it to you. After all, the channel is called Shadows for a reason. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, or share the video with your friends. All of it earns you karma points. Thanks again, stay safe, stay vigilant, and I'll see you next